Jose Mourinho has been sacked or has left Manchester United, probably with an awful lot of money. It's only last January that he signed a new 15 million a year contract, so he's gone. And I'm joined by John Giles, a former Manchester United player, somebody also who saw the departure of Matt Busby and what happened after this, and of course the departure from Leeds of Don Revie. John, there's something strangely familiar for those of us who played for Manchester United in this departure of Mourinho. It's sort of Ferguson left, David Moyes came and was deemed to have failed, although he never really got a good chance. Van Gaal came, failed, spent a lot of money. Mourinho came, failed. After Busby, it was Wilf McGuinness, failed. Tommy Docherty, failed. Dave Sexton, Franco Farrell, failed. So there is a sort of historical analogy here. But in the first instance, what about the Mourinho departure? No surprise.
No, I don't think so, Eamon. On your programme the last few months, I'd say we've been talking about the possibility of this happening. When it happens, it always seems to happen very, very quickly, Eamon. But, I think the result over the weekend, particularly along with other things that's happened, I think was inevitable. When it happens, it's always a little bit of a shock. Yeah, it happens so suddenly. But no great surprise, I don't think.
No,
overall,
I should just tell our listeners that we're getting reports that they are going to appoint a caretaker manager until the end of the season, and then they're going to do that within the next 48 hours, and then they intend to make an appointment, and they have specified that it will be an external appointment. In other words, it's somebody who's working somewhere else at the moment. So that's the club's response. But John, the context for this, there are a number of contexts. One is that Liam and yourself, and indeed even I, never saw this as a marriage other than a marriage of convenience that was doomed almost from the beginning.
Well, Liam had that opinion. I think you had to a certain extent, Damon. But funny enough, I didn't share it. I thought it could always be a bit dodgy with Mourinho. But I thought he was, and well, I still believe he has been a great manager, Eamon. Yeah. And I thought it was a good appointment. I would have appointed him at the time for what it's worth. Yeah. Because I thought, football-wise, he knows his stuff. He can get out and do it. Okay, he might not be as attractive as other managers, or might not seem to be as attractive, but he'd be effective. But he hasn't been attractive, and he hasn't been effective, Eamon.
Yeah. And
so I think you and Liam were right.
Yeah. No, the point I suppose that we both made was, there was a couple of points. The main point was that the way he likes the game to be played and the way he behaves didn't fit with the United's idea of itself. I mean, Bobby Charlton said several years ago, long before disappointment, that he was asked about Mourinho. He said he's not the type of man for this club. And Bobby is Manchester United to his core. He's a friend of yours, John, and it was a dressing room colleague of yours. Bobby would have his finger on a certain kind of pulse that is Manchester United, and he wasn't wrong in that respect, was he?
No, he was right. He was right. Ultimately, he was right, Eamon. I didn't read it that way. I thought, what he did at Chelsea, what he did at Portugal and Italy, and that was great work, Eamon. Great coaching work.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, it might not be as attractive as Manchester United are used to, but he'd be effective. Now he's been neither, and I think Bobby would have been talking about character-wise in many ways,
yes.
Eamon. Like what he did with the doctor at Chelsea, for example.
Yes.
And that would be totally against, and most people, against Bobby's attitude to life. Bobby is a gentleman, as you said there, and Bobby would think that was dreadful behaviour, and he wouldn't like it coming to Manchester United. As a lot of other people felt the same way. I mean, you and Liam felt, football-wise, that he wasn't the fit.
Yes.
I didn't think of it that way. I thought certainly in a certain way. I mean, I never liked Mourinho. I always admired him, for his football abilities, but he could never take any blame and all the various things that the faults he had. But as a football man, he was great. And I think when you go back to the start, you have to go back again to the Pogba situation.
Yep.
Because when he first took over, I think he was desperate for the Manchester United job. Manchester United needs a big signing, as we know. And I think he sold his soul, a lot of his soul, in that particular situation. He described Pogba as the complete midfield player.
Yeah.
Now, Mourinho is a football man.
Yes.
Pogba was never the complete midfield player. So it's been problems with Pogba from day one.
Yes.
I think Pogba was against all his beliefs in what players should be doing, and he had to live with him. And ultimately, I think it's the Pogba situation that has broken him.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's no doubt. And in fact, Pogba posted online this morning a picture of himself smirking and inviting people to put a caption on it, which is really bad form. But to go back, it is bad form. But to go back to Manchester United and where they are now as a club and how they get out of this hole, I think, John, I wrote a book about Busby. It was more or less about Busby. It was a history of United, and you are very familiar because you left the club in '63. Busby went on. He won the European Cup in '68. Then he retired, and very much like Ferguson, he was totally dominant in the club, and finding the next man, finding the successor, proved to be an ordeal for everybody. In the case of Wilf McGuinness, I think Wilf had a nervous breakdown, who followed Busby. But if you look at the pattern, David Moyes again, Van Gaal, now Mourinho, it's a big boots you have to fill, isn't it? You have to have a lot of character, a lot of substance to get a grip on this vast institution and its culture and its ideas of itself.
Yeah, well, it's the same in any business. How often do you get a Ferguson or a Shankly or a Busby? That's why it's so difficult. That when you have them, you have to really treasure them, and I think Manchester United did, the owners with Ferguson, and certainly with Manchester with Matt Busby when he was there. But they were characters of a certain type. Yes. From going back to Mourinho a little bit. Mourinho, everybody said he's always a 3-year man. He found a way to fall out with people, because he didn't have the character of Busby and Shankly and Ferguson. I mean, in Ferguson's case, we've heard of the hairdryer every so often, where he used to give the players the hairdryer in the dressing room when he wasn't pleased after the match. But it was done privately. Nobody knew who he was giving the hairdryer to.
No.
And everything he did, Matt Busby was deadly. Matt Busby was a charming man, but he was very ruthless when he had to be ruthless. Like in Mourinho's case, from day one, since he come in, particularly things going against him, all the players were humiliated publicly.
Yeah.
And once you do that as a manager, then you're going to lose them somewhere along the line. But to get back to the situation of replacing the great managers, it's very, very difficult.
Well,
great managers come back once in a blue moon. It's very, very hard to replace them. Very difficult. How long did it take Manchester United to do it? Leeds never really did it after Don Revie and many other managers after that. It's very, very difficult when you've got a manager like to be fair to the American owners of Manchester United, I think they did recognise the situation with Ferguson.
Yes.
And kept him, and I think looked after him well, and treasured him. Whereas lots of other clubs make a mistake. Anybody can do this job. I'm not saying Manchester United did, because Ferguson was gone anyway. But a lot of people in football, directors and owners, think, well, it's not such a big job anyway. Anybody can do that. It's a very, very difficult, almost impossible. What they have to do, Manchester United now, is make the next manager the right one. Now, that's a big problem. They might go for Pochettino, which I would go for now.
Yes.
Even if it's 50 million or 60 million, I think it'll be money well spent in the long run. Because a good manager over a number of years, if it's 50 million, if he's successful, is a tiny piece of money to pay.
Yeah. Now the question is, and let's talk just football for a moment. If you look at the players that they have on their staff, all of them, there has been an awful lot of pretty average players bought for fortunes. I mean, fortunes. Rojo, for example, who's useless. He's Argentinian. He cost only 25 million 4 or 5 years ago. He's been, I'm talking about fringe players, really. Darmian, Lindelof, 31 million. A player who really is part of the problem as a central defender. They have bought an awful lot of poor players, and of course the big extravagant 100 million euro purchase of Pogba fits into that. Is it a job that's a serious man would even want at the moment, John?
Oh yeah, definitely, Eamon.
Yeah?
Definitely. I mean, that's the position it's in at the moment. I mean, if they weren't doing well, then you wouldn't be looking for a new manager.
Right.
But it's still a dream job if it's done properly, I mean. In Mourinho's case, first of all, he had the money to spend. You go into a lot of clubs, Bournemouth and Cardiff, for these guys, where it's difficult, they don't have the money to spend.
Yeah.
What happened at Manchester United, it wasn't spent wisely.
But was he spending? They have a chief executive, John, Ed Woodward.
Yeah.
He's a marketing man. I think he bought Pogba personally, and I don't think that Mourinho had control, John. And that was a problem for the people who succeeded Busby as well, in a way, because Busby was still there in another capacity.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that Mourinho, Eamon, taking the job and going with the job if he didn't have the power to do it, because he's a football man. And if you go to the other clubs, to be fair to him, Chelsea and that, there was players put on him that he didn't want, and he left. And like, he's been a great manager, there's no doubt. Great manager.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, John. There's a sense, and I subscribe to this, that he's yesterday's man. The kind of football he played even is maybe yesterday's football. The new game now, as played by Manchester City and played by Liverpool, is much more offensive. It's much more about the brilliance of forwards, as we can see again with those two clubs. Even with Pochettino, it's a different game. Now, you probably disagree. Tell me why you disagree.
Well, I don't think football, Eamon, ultimately ever changes. It's a basic thing in football from the time you were a kid and I was a kid playing in the street. And this is my take on it. If you haven't got the ball, everybody's obliged to get the ball back. And when you have it, everybody's obliged to use it as constructively as they possibly can.
Yeah.
Now, you get different formations. You got playing out from the back. I don't think that has changed from Mourinho's point of view. I think his principles on the game were very, very good. I think he's lost his way at Old Trafford, the Pogba situation, maybe not in charge of the transfers where he should be. We don't know that, but there's certainly a possibility of it. But I think his principle of playing at Chelsea was, when you haven't got the ball, you win it back, and everybody works hard. I think what's killed him at Old Trafford, mainly the Pogba situation, because he is totally against all the things that Mourinho believes in, and he had to live with him or make the best of it, and he couldn't. You can't make the best of Pogba, Eamon. And other players that were bought there before, and he's just left in his judgment on defenders and the various things that he's bought, we spent a lot of money, have been poor. That's bad judgment, Eamon. You know, if you get the right players in, for example, if you get Van Dijk, for example, coming from Southampton, has made a huge difference to Liverpool, as everybody would agree.
Yes.
But he would be regarded as an old-fashioned centre-half.
Yep.
You know, he's a good player, he's good on the ball. John Terry, all the players that Mourinho had, you're only as good as the players you have. And 90% of the job when you come into a new club like Manchester United, or Mourinho or anybody else, is getting the right players in.
Yep.
He never got the right players in.
No.
There were bad players in before he came there, and he never got the right players in. So I don't actually believe in the style, or it's old-fashioned or new-fashioned or whatever it might be. I think football is football. Obviously, there are different attitudes now, playing out from the back. But playing out from the back, Eamon, in my opinion, 50% of the time is wrong.
Yeah, me too. But just to try and advance that argument a little bit, John.
Okay.
This is what I see. If you look at the great sides of recent years in Europe, Real Madrid, of course, with their 3 Champions League. Barcelona also. Manchester City now, who are blazing a different kind of trail. Klopp, both for his time at Dortmund and also for his time at Liverpool. There is a more offensive vibe. It isn't really, if I look at Mourinho's great teams, Inter Milan, miserly, give nothing away, win 1-0. Week after week, and in the Champions League the same. They went to the new camp, they put 11 behind, 10 behind the ball, got their result in the quarter-final, I think it was. They beat Barcelona, went on to win the Champions League. If you look at his Chelsea teams, John Terry, Frank Lampard, yes, in midfield scoring goals, but Drogba up front, play it long when you have to, make absolute maximum you can from set pieces. In other words, the game now, I think, is more fluid. It's more, there's 4-3-3, there's the interchange of attackers. If you look at, say, City, or look at Chelsea even, Hazard playing, as the out-and-out front player. I mean, they... so I do think...
Yeah, but is that right, though, Eamon? Is that
No,
good?
it's not. No, I don't. Everything changes. Everything changes in football. But so if you go back to his time at Chelsea... Yeah.
They used to concede less goals than anybody else. But I mean, if you look at how many goals they scored,
not many.
They were up there with the top.
They didn't score many.
Chelsea.
I remember week after week at the Bridge, the home games particularly, they kept it tight. It was tight. I can remember so many times when John Terry came up and scored a winner for a corner late in the game.
Yeah, well, of course.
That's the way they played, John.
He didn't. Of course he did. That's what he's supposed to do. I mean, it was, that's what John Terry was good at. But if you look at the way in which they played, I never had any objection to Chelsea playing the way they played. I think his philosophy was good, and he was known as my opinion is he was known as a defensive manager because when people attacked Chelsea, they couldn't score.
Yep.
So they were defending for longer periods than anybody else. Whereas with Arsenal, for example, in the later years of Wenger, every time they attacked, they scored.
Yeah.
The teams attacked, they scored. So therefore, they weren't defending as long as Chelsea were defending. But they should have been.
Yep.
So I think his philosophy on the game is good. I don't think he had the players at Old Trafford. A lot of it that's his own fault for not getting the right players in. But I don't think there's an old-fashioned situation in football.
Okay.
I think if it's done properly, it's done. There are different situations where you're playing out from the back now more so than ever before, and you'll get different trends all the time. But if you look at his team, as you said, with Inter Milan, he probably didn't have any great players, Eamon. That was good coaching and good management that they had to defend, and that's what they were going to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when he had the players... Yeah, sorry. The manager can only do what he has to do with the players at his disposal. Where he slipped up at Old Trafford with the amount of money that he got in and the Pogba situation, Eamon, the money wasn't well spent. He didn't get good players in.
Yep.
I think his philosophy is good because he's always said when you haven't got the ball, you work hard to get back, which he did at Chelsea. But he had the good players there.
Yep.
He had John Terry and he had various other players at Chelsea. He doesn't have those players.
Yep.
At Old Trafford. And of course there are different ways, like Guardiola's attitude to the game is different to Klopp's attitude to the game. There isn't any one way, but the basic principle, if you look at Klopp at Liverpool, I mean, he insists on all the players when they haven't got the ball to get back. You remember Benteke, when he had Benteke?
Yes.
Couldn't stand him.
No.
Couldn't stand him because there's an honesty about what he does. I don't agree with everything he does, like all managers, but they work, and that's what that's what Mourinho always had in his teams. Pogba must have driven him totally mad.
Yeah.
Where he was against all these principles of getting back and winning the ball and playing in that. He just couldn't. He wasn't manageable, if that's the right word for Pogba.
Yeah.
So I think that was his main thing. But all the other players that he had, Eamon, all of the players that he brought in, the defenders particularly, weren't up to scratch.
No, they
just weren't up to scratch. So that's why he's been sacked. The results have been bad if you buy the bad players in. Manchester United now, they need a manager that can come in. It's going to be difficult in this season. Who knows his stuff? I think he'll be given the money to spend, but it has to be well spent. If it's not well spent, then you're ultimately going to fail. He has failed.
Yeah, so one of the ironies of this is that as they have failed in the last couple of seasons on the pitch, in the last several seasons now, they are actually becoming, and have become this year, the richest club in the world through the marketing of shirts and other paraphernalia associated with the game. Everything with a Manchester United brand on it sells. They've outstripped even Real Madrid in that department. So whilst the commercial side of the club is going in one direction, the football side of it was going very much in the opposite direction. Now, the thing about the players, John, and this would...
Eamon, can I just say something to you there? That will only last for so long, Eamon, because you'll have kids now coming up and they'll go with the successful team.
Yep.
There's kids growing up with Manchester United. We've got Manchester City now and Liverpool coming on.
Yep.
And if that goes on too long, then you lose the commercial aspect as well.
Yep.
That's what's very, very dangerous for them.
Okay.
You know, because Liverpool, the kids now will be looking out, they're going with Liverpool, and the kids will be going with Manchester City, and maybe Spurs. That's if it lasts long enough, and you lose a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations of kids that would be buying that jersey. I mean, that's why it's so vital for them to get it right straight away.
Right. Now, I think your call on Pochettino is perfect, and I think it's right. I think Spurs will fight. Obviously, Daniel Levy, the chief executive there, will fight with all his might to keep Pochettino. They've given him a 5-year contract, but he is a good choice. There's no doubt about it. As a young working coach, he could take time. Here's the question, and this goes back to what happened after Busby. You walk into Manchester United tomorrow morning, if you're Pochettino, and you look at the staff, you look at the players you've got, and you think, for my God, where do I start? And of course, where do you start? You start with Pogba, for example. What am I going to do with this guy? And then you look at Martial, who really isn't a player at all, John. He's not going to save you or even contribute very much. You look at Herrera. You look at Matic, whose legs have gone, John, and palpably gone. He couldn't get around the pitch for in recent months, and he can't get around it now. You look then at Chris Smalling. You look at Valencia and Ashley Young, 2 fullbacks who were actually wingers converted to fullback. And then you look at Lindelof, and then you look at Bailly. It's pretty grim, John. Now, you were the great manager
it is grim,
and a great player. Where do you go?
Well, first of all, you start at the start and assess those players and see what you can do. But the thing is, now he will have resources to bring players in. You see, if you go back at all the great managers, say Shankly, you know where Liverpool were when Shankly went to Liverpool?
Yeah, they're in the second division.
Mediocre second division team.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that was a miracle for him to do what needed to be done. When Don Revie took over at Leeds, they were fighting against relegation to the second division.
Yeah, in the
and
second
if you looked
division,
at that job, you'd say, sorry?
Revie, they were in the second division, fighting relegation out of that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Sure.
Sorry. Yeah, they were fighting relegation in the second division. And you look at all when Bill Nicholson took over at Spurs, that's how the great managers do what they do, Eamon. They assess the situation, who do I keep, who do I go? Who do I let go? Who do I get in? But most of these great managers didn't start at successful clubs.
Okay.
Like when Ferguson took over at Manchester United, you'd have to say, God Almighty, what a job he has.
Yeah. Okay.
That's on.
Now,
you know, that's what great managers do, Eamon. They can turn it around quickly, you know, especially nowadays if you have the resources, which a new manager coming into Manchester United will have the resources to do it.
Okay, I'm going to put this to you, John. All of the guys, Shankly, Busby started off on a bomb site, and Revie, of course, we know, but they were starting from a very low base with no money spent, with the future to build, and not great expectations. That is not the situation at Manchester United. This is why it's like the post-Busby era. This is the post-Ferguson era. And here's the difference between what you cited, I would argue, and what will face...
That is the point, Eamon. But no, this is an easier job than Busby and taking over from Busby. These guys nowadays have the resources to buy. You can buy now, Eamon. When Busby took over Manchester, didn't have a penny.
John.
Revy didn't have a penny. Shankly didn't have a penny.
Nobody.
But they were able to build from that base. That's what judgment is all about. That's what the great managers are able to do.
Nobody.
So I think it's an easier job for somebody coming into Manchester United.
Okay.
And those lads are just as easy or just as difficult, right, whatever it might be.
Well, here's the counter argument. There are about 15 players that cost the guts of €1 billion to buy, that would have to be shifted out straight away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, with the transfer market the way it is today, you're going to have to spend another $1 billion to get in what you really need. And here's the third box that can't be ticked. There are very, very few top quality players, fewer than ever before in the history of the game, that are available. And I think this is a much more complex problem than Shankly going to Liverpool or Busby going to United or Revy going to Leeds. This is a question of how can I get rid of all that rubbish that we've paid fortunes for. I mean, Darmian, for example, only cost 22 million. I mean, there's guys in there that you'd have forgotten about that they're even at the club because it's so long since they played. But they're all they're on fortunes, John. They're on their contracts, and the contracts are still. So this is much more complicated for a coach than it ever was for those guys back in the day in an entirely different football world.
It is a different time. I mean, it's a different time, and of course there are downsides, but there are upsides as well. I mean, if you go back to Shankly's time, he hardly had any money going into it. Now, he had to get rid of players. I know that it was a different time, but he still had to get rid of players. He had to pick them up. Manchester United get rid of players, Eamon. They get rid of players. They get X amount from them. They lose a lot of money on the players that they've got.
Yes,
but they'll get some money in, and now they do have the resources then to pick up. I mean, where did Klopp get his players from? And that's only 3 years ago, Eamon.
Yep.
You know, you get them. Where did Pochettino get his players from? And he hasn't spent a lot of money at all. You know.
Yeah, no.
So there's a way of doing it. We don't know. You know, like there's ways of doing it, but all the great managers have never started off with say, "Oh, this is an easy job to do."
No.
They were all difficult jobs to do. All of them that you can mention over the years. You know, when Ferguson came into Old Trafford, Eamon, look what he had to get rid of.
Yep. Okay.
And he did it. It took him 3 years to do it, but he did it. Eventually he did it. You know, Shankly did it when Revy did it. And these are what make these guys great managers. And that's why the Ferguson, when he left Manchester United, like this is what. How do you replace these guys? And that, Manchester United, and that's what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
How are they going to replace Mourinho? Because it's a very difficult situation. But a great manager, I think if Pochettino is what we think he is, he will do it. It might take him 2 years. It might take him 3 years, Eamon.
Right.
Because nobody is going to do it overnight. But eventually they get there.
Well, I think
you know, they fit in the pieces.
No, I think the point you're making there is actually valid. I think it trumps the point I was trying to make in that you have cited two guys, Pochettino and Klopp, who have come into situations at very big clubs and without breaking the bank, they've done the job. So I think that is possibly the model. I would still argue that the problem at Manchester United is the problems are deeper and the cost factors to replace the rubbish he's going to have to get rid of. And the other thing is, hold on, just
they
one
do
more.
have the resources, Eamon.
Just one more.
Go on.
Just one more thing. If you want to get rid of Rojo, for example, or Lindelof, they're on 3-4 year contracts, and they're being paid way over the odds. So they might just hang around, and they can do that. And the other clubs might have a problem buying them, the clubs they should be playing for, which would be less clubs. But all of that is to be seen. I think.
But that's it. They're deals, Eamon. They're deals, you know. They're deals. You know, I don't think any player wants to hang around for 2 or 3 years without playing. I don't think it's. I'd be very, very surprised if a lot of players want to do that. Whereas they can get paid off to go, and they go and they get somewhere else. That's the way it works nowadays, Eamon. You know, you don't have to stick with them and pay them for 3 years. The players want to go, and you make it attractive enough for them to go. And the point I'm making is, I know it's going to be very expensive, but the one thing the United do have, they do have the resources to do that. And ultimately, if it does cost them a lot of money in the first when they're first doing it, but become successful, that money will become buttons to them, Eamon.
Okay, well,
that is the payoff of the players. Ultimately, if they become successful, then whatever they have to pay off, even if they pay if they paid 60 million for Pochettino, for example, right, to Spurs,
that'd be good value.
Levy might do that. If he's successful, Eamon, that 50 million, 60 million that looks expensive at the start will be totally buttons. He'll have it paid back within 18 months, at least, at the most, at that time, if he's successful.
Okay, John, it's great to talk to you today on that breaking story. I hope you're right. We'll watch this space. As always, Manchester United are pretty much the biggest story in football. And for anyone who didn't hear the beginning of this conversation, Jose Mourinho has left the club with a sack full of money. And good luck to him.